Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Ahi Purusho Param.
Adipurusho Bharam.
Sirasa Gurum Advaham.
Shirasha Guru Advaham.
Tam Skandena Adhate.
Tam Skandena Adhate.
Sarva Pratikriya.
Sarva Pratikriya.
Tahi Purusho Param.
Tahi Purusho Bharam.
Shirasa Guru Advaya Advaham.
Shirasa Guru Advaham.
Tam Skandena Sadadate.
Tam Skandena Sadhate.
Sarva Pratikriya.
Sarva Pratikriya.
A man may carry a burden on his head, and when he feels it to be too heavy, he sometimes gives relief to his head by putting the burden on his shoulder. This way, he tries to relieve himself of the burden. However, whatever process he devises to counteract the burden does nothing more than put the same burden from one place to another. Report by Srila Prabhupada. This is a good description of an attempt to transfer a burden from one place to another. When one gets tired of keeping a burden on his head, he will place it on his shoulder. This does not mean that he has become free of the strains of carrying the burden. Similarly, human society in the name of civilization is creating one kind of trouble to avoid another kind of trouble. In contemporary civilization, we see that there are many automobiles manufactured to carry us swiftly from one place to another. At the same time, we have created other problems. We have to construct so many roads, and yet these roads are insufficient to cope with automobile congestion and traffic jams. There are also the problems of air pollution and fuel shortage. Pollution is that the processes we manufacture to counteract or minimize our distress, not actually put an end to our pains. All simply illusion. Simply place the burden from the head to the shoulder. The real way we can minimize our problems is to surrender to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and to give ourselves up to His protection. Lord, being all powerful, can make arrangements to mitigate our pain in life. Narada, instructing King Pachitibari, is a tough customer. King Pachitibari is attached to fruitive activities. When Telman is very attached to fruitive activities, what's their incentive? It's upgrade from whatever to something better on the material plane. The calculation is happiness is the material plane. You can do more of this or more variety or better quality or something, and happiness is going to result. That's the carrot. And Narada has the challenge of helping the king understand that's not a good plan. And that if once the plan that's not a good plan is acknowledged as being not a good plan, then what? So naturally, Narada, he's a Shakti Vaishavatar. And the Shakti that he's invested with and carrying and transmitting is Bhakti Shakti. And there are sometimes obstacles, like undue attachment to fruitive activities. It's part of our definition of bhakti. Anyabhilasha dushanyam jnana karma janavritam. But supposing somebody isn't ready to let go of the jnana or karma efforts, then the bhakti giver, in this case Narada, has to understand the mindset, the disposition, the qualities and characteristics of the candidate to receive bhakti, and help with that understanding, help them become free from that undue attachment to jnana or karma. In this case, it's karma. I mean, pious karma, with the expectation that this is going to bring happiness. So in a whole series of expertly woven explanations given to King Prachinibhari, he eventually gets it. Now, sometimes people don't eventually get it, or they even say they get it, but they don't get it. So and even if for some period of time they get it, wait a while and it comes back again, because tendencies are very strong. They don't disappear so quickly. Tendency doesn't disappear so quickly. Therefore, sadhu sangha is initially required. It's sadhu sangha in the intermediate situation of life, circumstance of life is needed. And according to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, even in the topmost stages, sadhu sangha is not optional. Sadhu sangha is imperative in order to go beyond material karma and gyan tendencies. But that's nice, have something that helps one go beyond the entangling tendencies. So now back to the surgical analysis of the byproduct of fruitive activities, pious fruitive activities, pious, impious. Fruitive activities are binding. And whether it's pious or impious, there's some burden, that's the focus of this particular verse, involved. I mean, having a material body through which the fruitive activity is done. There's the burden just having the body. And it doesn't work, just get out a paring knife and peel off the body and then now you're liberated. It doesn't work like that. So, tendencies due to modes of nature and past activity, good and karma, tendencies are quite strong. And the path of fruitive activities, piously performed, there to some degree, there's burdensome. Even impious activities is burdensome, as mentioned. The idea of elevation through its vast consideration for those that are interested in elevation of themselves, or elevation of mankind, or their group, or whatever it is. Elevation is calculated in terms of a material upgrade from this facility to that facility, and to do that upgrade, there's some procedure, and some procedure means some inconvenience. I voluntarily submit myself to some inconvenience. Why? Because I get an upgrade. Because the platform of enjoyment will be enhanced, whatever the conception of enjoyment might be. Even charitable work, the conception of benefiting others through charitable work. That's a nice activity. Recommended charity is certainly a feature of the quality of goodness, so let me do charity. And with charity, there may be some burden, but that's okay because I derive some happiness from sacrifice for others, being charitable. It's a mode of goodness, happiness, described right in Bhagavad Gita. But there's some inconvenience. So now I don't mind the inconvenience because I like the happiness. And then wait a while, and it doesn't take too long, and the happiness fades, and the happiness becomes something else. Just because it's the nature of the material realm in which we're residing. There's duality, and sometimes it's light and sometimes it's dark. Just like the weather changed the past 24 hours. It was warm and now it's cold. Before it was air conditioning and now it's heater. Yeah. So there's some inconvenience. Regardless, just wait a while. If you think there's no inconvenience, that's illusion. But wait a while, and the inconvenience shifts from that to this. And then another, and it's endless. The journey in material existence is endless. So the advice to King Prachinibari, my dear king, the search for happiness through fruitive activities is foolish, because you want to relieve yourself of something, so you do another something to get relief from that something. But you're accepting a burden, and all you have managed to accomplish, the verse is saying, and it's true, you've shifted the burden from one place to another place. It's not the platform of real happiness, and we want happiness. So then, in this section so far, he's not dealing with an impersonalist, he's dealing with a materialist, an elevated materialist, a pious king. Supposing one goes the other direction, let's just negate everything, the happiness, unhappiness, and let it become a blur. That's completely unnatural as far as the constitution of the soul is concerned, because the soul by nature is Satchit Ananda. So that's not a solution. Happiness defined by negation is not what happiness is. It's a little bit like our discussion yesterday evening, where is there suffering in a perfect world? There's perfect suffering. But that suffering that we call perfect suffering is not the suffering of this world. This world suffering is a reflection of the real thing. The real thing has all variety because the absolute whole has everything, but it's all complete and Krishna-centric. So it's in short that where this discussion with King Prachinibari is going is leave aside the calculation of happiness is the byproduct of fruitive activities, because the method of fruitive activities is simply shifting the burden of inconvenience that doesn't result in anything permanent, nor what real happiness is. So to the extent that can be communicated effectively and understood by a receiving person, then the next question is, what's the alternative? But you can't just jump to the alternative. I mean, if somebody tries to jump to the alternative, it's not going to stick because they have their tendencies, conditioned tendencies. So both are needed, the alternative and the
knowledge that lightens up darkness, or the light that eradicates darkness, the darkness of thinking of happiness in terms of fruitive activity. Jnana karma janavritam. So bhakti includes knowledge, but it's not just knowledge. Bhakti includes its austerities too, like this example of a burden being carried on one head and you just shift it to your shoulders. It's not that when you take up bhakti process, there's no inconvenience. However, that inconvenience is not just shifting from your head to your shoulder, the inconvenience. It's a transcendental process. That's clever. It's a different kind of changing of burden. In that, so it's convenient to say that, but how does it work? It means that sense of this is a burden disappears. It becomes this is very nice. Like rising early in the morning. You like getting up early in the morning? No? No. Huh? I still do it. One of the reasons to still do it is, those who are wise have advised me, early to bed, early to rise. You know that one? Yeah. Makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. So I like to be healthy. I like to be wise. Wealthy's more, whatever it is. But there's an inconvenience to get there, rising early. But that's as a mode of goodness principle, and the mode of goodness principle, living by it, I may like it, may not like it, but if I accept the principle, there's some inconvenience. But it's not just, if it goes to transcendence, then it's not just shifting the burden from my head to my shoulder. It's relieving me of burdens. What's that? So some people call it by different names. It can be called moksha. What's that? One of the definitions of moksha is cessation of material existence. Muktir hitvanyata rupam. Then, swarupena vyavastati, being situated in one's spiritual form, swarupa, being engaged in service to the Supreme. Then it's no longer just shifting the burden from the head to the shoulder. Its burden is gone. The joy, if one is very fortunate and enters into the bhakti mood, which is where Narada wants to take King Prajini Bari, because he's the bearer of bhakti shakti, there's this obstacle. The king is attached to fruitive activities, or someone may be attached to not getting up early, or sleeping as much as they like, or whatever that is that they're attached to. But accepting a burden in bhakti, some inconvenience, temporary inconvenience, it's not just getting up early. Birds get up earlier than most people, and chirping and singing and doing what they do. Where is food? Where is food? But it's making the connection, the transcendental burdens are gone position is the purpose behind this or that or the other thing is the Supreme Personality of Godhead is to be pleased, not just, I'd like to be free from burdens. But the Supreme, this is Svarupena Vyavastati, being situated in one's Swarup, one engages in service to the Supreme. That's the eternal position where burdens are gone. Let's go back to yesterday evening. I like this, a nice topic. Is there suffering in a perfect world? there's perfect suffering in a perfect world, but it's not the suffering that we know. It's another kind. And is there burdens in the spiritual world, in a perfect world? But it's the burden of love isn't a burden. So it can be thought of, instead of my interest, I'm serving the interest of the beloved. Love. Back seat goes my interest, front seat, my interest is the interest of the beloved. I just transformed the my interest to the interest of the beloved. The burden is gone. There's a burden of love, and that's the spiritual world, the realm of transcendental love, but it's not material. It's not the material kind of burden. It's a eternal burden of love, eternal love, where my happiness is the happiness of the beloved. And just to end with this, yesterday morning, around the same time, there was a discussion with the devotees in China. And the topic was Lakshmana, part 1. And Lakshmana is the personification, or is the perfect example of Sheshatvam, or servitude. And his happiness is whatever it takes, is the pleasure of Ram. And it's uncomfortable for him to even hear Ram say, what would you like? That's a nice example. When he's asked to build a cottage at Panchavati, Ram says, build a cottage that matches the needs of all three of us. And Lakshman is taken aback. Please don't speak like that. My interest is your interest, and there isn't anything else. It's similar to what Prahlad says to Lord Nrsingadev. There's nothing else between us. This is service, the mood of service. You're the master, I'm the servant. There's nothing else between us. So Lakshman has the same mood towards Ram. A devotee of the Lord has the same mood towards the Lord. And then, so the inconvenience or the suffering is a perfect suffering. Is there suffering in the realm of perfection? Yes. Is there unhappiness? The thought that I should consider my interests on a par with the interests of the beloved. That's uncomfortable. So is there uncomfortable? There's uncomfortable. Perfectly uncomfortable. Until then there's regulation. Sadhana bhakti. Before bhava bhakti and prema bhakti. So back to Narada and King Prachinibhari. He's not ready for prema bhakti or bhava bhakti. He just needs, some sadhana. And his practice is not sadhana bhakti, it's sadhana karma kanda. And so Narada has it's not too terribly difficult task of poking holes in the karma kanda formula for happiness, because it's not what happiness is. It's a burden that just shifts this burden from here to there. That it's a metaphor, but it's also very practical. And what about us? And just conclude with this. What about us? Is there a burden? Getting up early and this and that. by practice, that which may appear to be burdensome becomes joyful. And that's just mode of goodness, joyful. Regulation, being situated in the mode of goodness, one becomes conditioned to a sense of happiness, according to Bhagavad Gita. And that sense of happiness is on the material plane, which means there's competition with the modes, and sometimes that happiness is replaced with another happiness, indulgence in sense pleasure or something. The purpose isn't fixed. And in transcendental life, which the Bhagavatam is wanting to take the reader, and Narada wants to take King Prajini Bari, if he's ready to go there, is an alternative to the burdensomeness of fruitive activities. It's nice. Bhagavatam is very nice. So there's different exchanges with different persons as a speaker and audience, but it makes, by going through it carefully, it makes the big picture very clear. A wise person doesn't have 10,000 choices. A wise person has very focused set of choices with attaining shelter of the Supreme Person in loving service as what that path looks like. Very wonderful literature, Srimad Bhagavatam. Let's see if there's some discussion.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. So for the yesterday's class about the suffering.
Yesterday's class about what?
Suffering.
Suffering. Oh, that one. Okay.
Yeah, I like it a lot. So generally the thought is when we say suffering is bodily uncomfortable things.
Oh, mine too.
Yeah, mine too. But there are some situations we have happiness in the material world, but they are also, how do we realize they are also sufferings?
Wait a while.
Or be thoughtful. Is this what real happiness is? Is this what real happiness is? Because the material happiness, body or mind, is a perception made of some configuration of the material energy that looks like this, and happiness looks like this. And in a moment, this changes to that, changes to another thing, and the happiness fades. Or, real happiness is not something that fades. Real happiness is something that's permanent. Is there such a thing? Yes. But it's happiness on the soul platform, not happiness on the material platform. So it requires being thoughtful. One isn't going to reach these conclusions without being thoughtful, and then guided by scripture and persons who are very wise that can help us see what we wouldn't see, because we're kind of stuck in the material paradigm. But that's what we're doing. We're trying, cultivating spiritual understanding, knowledge that dispels the darkness of ignorance. So the dispelling of the darkness of ignorance takes place gradually, like the rising of the sun, etc. So we just stay with it. Just like your example of getting up early. If that becomes a habit, just a way of that you live your life as you're a young man, in the way that you live your life, you rise early. not only you rise early after you rise early, you make the body clean, and then you make the inside clean. And if that becomes a practice, then another kind of happiness you can access that others will not access. You will not access, and others will not access without the principles of some inconvenience. That appears to be inconvenience, but it's actually goodness. Goodness is not an inconvenience. Goodness is our life. It's very, very natural. Okay, so there's a little response to your question. Someone else? Yes, in the back.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. I have two questions.
Can we turn
one-
the speaker so it's facing me? Go ahead, speak.
First thing is, you mentioned that when there is, when we do actions, we don't do it for our gratification, we do it for our beloved. So is that the same expression that humility, utter humility is the expression of love? So that's what I heard in one of the class. So is this the same expression? So when we feel humility, that is the real love.
You want to know the connection between humility and love?
Yeah, when it is the utter humility, that is the expression of love. That's what I heard in.
Humility is an expression of love.
Yeah.
That's what you heard.
Mm-hmm. So is that the same thing that we discussed, that you mentioned?
What's the punchline of the question? It's not clear. You want to help her? What's the punchline of her question?
Today what we discussed, is that the same thing?
They're related, but it's not the same thing. First of all, there are different conceptions of what humility is. And the connection between humility and the spiritual platform has different ideas of what that is. And then the platform of love is the mature stage of the spiritual platform. Now, what this morning's class is simply about fruitive activities. And the aspiration to find happiness through fruitive activities is being dismantled. So they're not connected. I don't see. Can you explain how you see a connection between them?
Yeah, I'm trying to recollect that you mentioned that we will not have self-interest or that I'm looking for some pleasure from material things. So there is a interest in the beloved, what my beloved wants. So I want to
Yes.
do that.
Yes.
I think I heard that you mentioned.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is a expression I was thinking. That is the humility part. So when I'm feeling utter humility, then I'll not think about my gratification. I'll think about what is my beloved's thing is. So that is where
the connection. Then let me try to say back what I'm hearing. The connection is the elimination of false ego, where I'm at the center. So you're equating humility to the removal of false ego, and if I remove false ego, then I can access humility.
yeah.
Or when false ego is ruling, humility is absent. So if
Yes.
I can remove the false ego portion, what's left? There's the absence of false ego, or who I really am.
Mm-hmm.
There's humility, because it's pretty tiny. And then I can start to access the beloved,
Yeah.
the platform of love. That's the connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. In that sense, there's certainly some connection, because what Narada is doing here is he's trying to dismantle the false ego conception that through fruitive activities I'll find happiness, and while doing the fruitive activities properly, there's some inconvenience. But I'm accepting that inconvenience because I want happiness. That's materially defined. So if I can get free from, if Narada can be successful in freeing the king, false ego driven, but it's, the focus here is fruitive activity specifically, karma kanda rituals. He's up to here in Vedic rituals, driven by desire to be an enjoyer, which is a false ego manifestation for sure. So there's some connection. Thoughtful question.
I have one more.
You have something else? Yes.
We discussed about transcending the pious
Atheism.
Sorry, no. Transcending pious activities also. When we hear about cowherd boys, that pious activities and these
Krita
pious...
punya punja, that's phrase.
So are these different pious activities?
Yeah, different, definitely different.
Okay.
Their punya is transcendental punya, not the material kind. A subset of the spiritual kind is the material kind. Included in $1 million is $10.
Thank you.
Up here.
Maharaj, you were mentioning about tendencies and also burden of love. So when there is love in the relationship, the interpersonal frictions doesn't seem to be a burden. But when there is a lack of love or in that relationship, it seems to be a heavy burden, and sometimes it feels like, okay, this is too much for me, and the tendency is to just move away from that burden. So how to overcome that kind of a tendency, Guru Maharaj?
You have to speak. How to overcome such a tendency is with a spiritual conception of who I am and a spiritual conception of what a relationship is. It takes purification. And generally, purification is gradual. So how to move away is by the path of purification, that path of bhakti. And until we become mature, there's going to be some immaturity, sometimes more, sometimes less. The I-centeredness is part of the immaturity. So I'm fine as long as my sensibilities are being padded. And if my sensibilities are not being padded, then my brow starts to wrinkle, and I'm not sure things are proceeding the way that they should. So self-centeredness is the nemesis, and the cure is Krishna-centeredness. And bhakti is the Krishna-centeredness path. So I'm using my mind and senses and my personality and my resourcefulness and everything with the purpose of pleasing Krishna. And then that's the remedy. And until that point in time comes, then there's going to be a bit of a mix. Prabhupada's example is sand in the sweet rice. Makes it unpalatable, although sweet rice is nice. Yes? Online. Okay.
This question is from Mahamantra Prabhu.
Mahamantra.
About Saint Francis mention of accepting refusals as charity.
Accessing what?
Accepting refusals as charity.
Confusion?
Refusals.
Refusal. I don't get it. Say it again.
Mention of accepting refusals as charity. That quality, does it come from the that quality come with becoming a part of spiritual master's mission or instruction?
You understand his question? Do you understand his question? Say it without reading it.
So yesterday you mentioned about
Yesterday I mentioned?
about Saint Francis. He's
Saint
accepting
Francis, yes.
accepting some charities.
No, it wasn't accepting charity. It was accepting inconvenience as joy. Insult as joy. Being misunderstood and verbally abused as joy. So I don't see the connection. Maybe he can do this another time rather than back and forth right now. Go ahead, pass the microphone. Anything else?
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. So, we talk about purification. Does purification has to be always painful, or it can
No.
be?
Why? Why would you ask that question?
Because generally, the purification, when we say it requires austerity, or
But austerity can be joyful. Some people like austerity. You know some people that like, you're probably one that likes austerity. I know some people that like austerity. They like it. So that's not, for the person observing the one undergoing austerity, they may go, oh, look at that. And the person who's undergoing may go, ah. Joyful. To happiness. Depends on the mode of nature. So it's not painful or displeasing. It's not because it hurts. That's a good sign. Not like that. Depends on the mode of nature and the disposition of the person. This is getting me closer to Krishna. Joy. Okay. So we'll end there. Thank you very much. Prabhupada ki Jai.
Yeah.